Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Mirror Dungeon video. Today we'll be channeling our inner Bloodfiend by using the best bleed team possible. Like with its sister status effect, Rupture, Bleed has plenty of identities who have a small amount of bleed scattered about in their kit, but are not truly bleed identities, with them either focusing more on some other status effect or being more geared towards general support. In fact, there is exclusively one character who I wouldn't consider to have a bad bleed identity, and that's Otis. Her only two identities that are even capable of inflicting bleed are Barber and Ring, both of which support it reasonably well, and that is why she is the only sinner who you will not see in this video. As for everyone else, well, it should be fairly obvious as to why each of them are here. Anyway, to start the run off, we take every single starter buff we can and find these ego gifts on the first floor of Lake World before making it to the boss against the Twin Hook Pirates. So, I kind of maybe went a little overboard with the amount of ego gifts I started with. I mean, this is actually the second time I've attempted this run. Not because I failed or anything. I mean, it's basically impossible to fail. Just because I wasn't really satisfied with the result of the previous attempt of when I did this. Mostly because my commentary sucked, to be honest. It was just bad. So yeah, for this run, I just decided, you know what? Let's just start with literally everything. And it's like it's a bit of a weird situation where it's, you know, this is supposed to be a bad bleed team, right? But the thing is, the Mirror Dungeon on its own is enough to support literally any status effect, to be honest. You could be using the actual worst identity for any status effect, and the Mirror Dungeon ego gifts support it perfectly fine, you know? I mean, for Bleed in particular, all you need is the Tier 2 upgraded Wound Clarid, and you'll never kill a Bleed stack, even with the worst Bleed identity in the game. And that's like doubly so when you're dealing with the actual, like, Tier 4 Bleed ego gifts, because they all have very similar effects as well, you know? They all pretty much make it so that when you're using an attack, you get extra bleed count. And that's the big thing, right? Like, bleed as a status effect, or, well, pretty much any of these status effects that trigger very, very quickly, they're heavily dependent on their count. So it's like, having so much of it from just all of these various Mirror Dungeon ego gifts. As you can see, you could just be literally the worst team in the game for certain things, and it just doesn't matter. It just straight up doesn't matter. And in fact, it's sometimes even better because you can also focus on multiple other things as well, because this team is very close to being a Blois team, as people like to call it. We head into Hell's Chicken for the next floor, where we find Nebulizer, Pendant of Nostalgia, Contaminated Needle and Thread, Illusory Hunt, Emerald Elytra, Finifugality, Ornamental Horseshoe, Recollection of a Certain Day, Cigarette Holder, Red Sting Gossipium, and the Dueling Manual Book 3 before making it to the boss against Papa Bongi. Honestly, this is what happens when you take literally every single starter buff in the game. You just become overpowered on floor 1. And that just, it scales even further and further beyond, until literally nothing is a threat. I mean, look at that. 300 damage, resisted hit. Ridiculous. It's ridiculous. But anyway, this team is basically a almost a Blois team, right? We're literally one off, and we could very easily be a Blois team if not for this guy right here, because he could very easily be replaced for Blade Lineage Sinclair. But Enclair is technically the worst bleed identity because he has 2 bleed potency versus Blade Lineage's 3, which is kind of funny to think about because the quote-unquote bleed faction, like their main identity is just he has no bleed at all. We head into Hatred and Despair for the next floor where we find Bloody Gadget, an extra skill 3, 4-leaf clover, punctured memory, and clear mirror calm water before making it to the boss against the Knight of Despair. So here's a fairly interesting fight. The Knight of Despair. I say she's interesting because, you know, she's very tanky. She actually has a passive that makes her resistant to all status effects, actually. And most importantly, she has a lot of coins. All of those together make it so that bleed is actually decent, even though she does take half damage from it, right? There's a very good chance that she just dies like substantially prematurely here. Hi, Queenie. I love you. You know, I think I was actually wrong about the Knight's gimmick. By which I mean, she doesn't... How her swords work, because basically the game picks one of them to be the one that's the main one that you're supposed to defeat every turn or whatever, right? It gives one of them a second skill slot. And initially I thought that it was determined by how much, you know, of a certain damage type you have. Like, if your primary damage type is Pierce, then the Pierce one is the one that becomes exposed first. But seeing how we're like incredibly varied here with our damage types, with having a lot of Slash, Blunt, and Pierce all like spread out very evenly, it makes me think that the actual one that becomes exposed is the main damage type of your first deployed unit, which currently that's, you know, Pequod Ishmael. And since she's Pierce, it was the Pierce one that was exposed first. Also, yeah, the Knight just died. Very easy fight. Thank you, bleed damage. Sorry, Queenie, but I'm not gonna wait like 5 turns to let you get the finishing blow. It's not worth it. We actually did kill the bleed stack there because I clashed with my So, even though I shouldn't have. Like, he's the one who's probably the least bleed out of anybody, considering his only bleed comes from the bone claiming, which is almost never going to be a thing that can happen. But it doesn't matter. Easy fight. We head into Time Killing Time for the next floor, where we find Late Bloomer's tattoo before making it to the boss against the Time Ripper. Alright, so we have the Time Ripper here. He's honestly pretty easy. But one thing I want to kind of talk about is specifically my choice of identity when it comes to Don Quixote, right? Because she basically has 2 different identities that kind of fit for this, right? Either N-Corp or Base. They both have very similar bleed application, right? But the reason why I chose base over N-Corp had to do with the fact that, first of all, the more N-Corp identities you have, the better they are for bleed. And that's purely because of how Nails works, right? Nails is a pretty, honestly, pathetic status effect, if I'm being completely honest. Mostly to do with just its distribution. And the fact that it's kind of like, unless it's applied on the next turn, unless it has next turn application, you know, it just kind of, all of the application that it has is effectively halved. But it is a lingering status effect, right? It's basically lingering bleed count. And because of that, you know, the more of it you have, the stronger it becomes. To the point where if you're using more than like 1 or 2 N-Corp identities, it honestly becomes pretty good. Oh well, we can't clash with everything here. It doesn't matter. It's so funny how, like, when you super buff Blade Lineage Mersul and you don't have, like, the specific Blade Lineage ego gifts, he rolls too high for him to ever use his bone claiming. It's kind of funny. But anyway, what was I saying about Nails? Something... Yeah, it's just the more N-Corp identities you have, the stronger it becomes. And because of that, I sort of decided that N-Corp Don Quixote is technically too powerful. Because she has the second best nail application out of, like, all of the identities. And because of that, it's like she's actually a pretty decent bleed identity if you're using her with a full N-Corp team. Which you're pretty much always going to be doing because the N-Corp identities kind of suck without the other ones. Oh, oopsie. I did not... Whoa, what the heck is going on there? Okay. I did not mean to kill her. We head into the evil defining for the next floor, where we find Temporal Brittle, and extra skill 3, Faith, the Book of Vengeance, Lunar Memory, and the Guiding Gas Lamp, before making it to the boss against the Pequod trio. Alright, here we go. Free win alert. God, we're so overpowered at this point. It's not even funny. It's not even funny how ridiculously overpowered we are. Like instant stagger. We did like a quarter of her health. One attack. Oh my god. Really just goes to show how powerful the starter buffs can really be. You just skyrocket out of control. Anyway, what do I want to talk about? Do I even have time to talk about anything? Not really. Fortunately, we do get at least one turn because Ahab's immune to death for at least one turn. But yeah, we just straight up win. There's nothing they can do. I don't even have time to talk about anything. These fights are too quick. I want to talk about. I gotta specifically pick fights that take longer than this one if I want to talk about anything important. Wow, Ahab's a pushover. We head into La Mancha Land reopening for the next floor, where we find the Token of Victory and the Melted Eyeball before making it to the boss against Dulcinea. Alright, well, this is a completely new run because, yeah, I got interrupted by the weekly reset. So that's cool. So yeah, I got a bunch of different ego gifts, or not really different, but it's more or less the same. We picked up more or less the same stuff in this new run, but there are a little bit of minor differences, such as this time around we have artistic sense. That's one of the differences. I'll show you in a second after this turn. But yeah, I just kind of completely forgot that the weekly dungeon reset was going to happen today when I'm recording. And unfortunately I had to redo the run again. Not that it really matters, to be honest. I mean, we're still ridiculously overpowered, and here are the current ego gifts. Still a lot. Slight differences. I don't think I had Downpour in the previous one, or Artistic Sense. So those are like the two main ones. But everything's more or less the same. We're still overpowered. Pequod Ishmael is still kicking ass. Doing over 1,000 damage with a skill 2. Crazy stuff. But this is why I think it's fine for the Mirror Dungeon to, you know, hard carry status effects, because the main DPS comes from the raw damage, right? You're always going to be doing more damage from just the regular coin rolls than anything that status effects can do. So having them just, the ego gets just hard carrying the status infliction, it's perfectly fine in my opinion, because you're always going to be doing more with just raw damage, so it's not that big of a deal. Maybe your opinion is different than mine, but that's my justification for having all these ego gifts. We head into Refraction Railway, Line 5 for the next floor, where we find the Mask of the Parade, La Mancha Land All-Day Pass, Coveting Thorn, Shatterbound Cannon, another Skill 3, Night Vision Goggles, Non-Disclosure Agreement, and the Broken Greatsword, before making it to the boss. Okay, Section 2. The hardest section for a solo run, perhaps the easiest section in a normal run. Why is it so easy? Because they have no health. They all just die instantly. The only real difficulty is if they outspeed you. Because if they outspeed you, you can't really do anything. And that seems to be what's happening here, which is pretty cool. Doesn't matter too much, but it is kind of annoying, so whatever. Anyway, one thing I want to talk about is the ego gift, the Shatterbound Cannon that we just recently picked up, because it's a bit of a strange one, right? It's a lot more helpful, like, in a regular run like this, I'd say, because getting every single character to have 10 damage up is quite difficult. But if you only have like one character, right? If you're doing a solo run, it's kind of it's purely a bad thing, because it's very easy to get a single character up to, you know, max 10 out of 10. Damage up. So it's basically only giving you the fragile at that point. Again, it's not really that bad in a run like this, because you can just, yeah, it's really not that bad in a full team, because not everyone is going to be at 10 sanity all the time. 10 damage up, I mean. Anyway, after Heathcliff is destroying us because we got a little mucky. Yeah, wow. He's kind of scary. He's definitely kind of scary. Something else I want to kind of talk about is the one of our characters. Yeah, that Heathcliff is pretty scary. You know what? Rabbit Heathcliff can die. I don't care about him. I forgot what I was talking about. I got distracted because this fight is not hard, but tricky because of Heathcliff. But anyway, one thing I wanted to talk about was specifically Blade Lineage Faust. Her main bleed application, right? Because it almost all comes from, no, it does all come from the Red Plum Blossom status effect. And that status effect is a fairly, it's a bit of an awkward status effect, to be honest, because it's in this weird point where, like, it is a fairly powerful effect. It's honestly more of a poise, a unique poise than unique bleed, because it allows critical hits to do more damage on hit while also applying a bit of bleed, right? But basically its actual main purpose is for, you know, it to give you extra crit damage. But the problem with it is, with the exception of Faust's skill 3, she just does not have very good application of it. Like her skill 3 has 10, which is the max, and then her skill 1 has 1, and then her skill 2 has 2, which is pathetic, especially when you take into account that it's not even guaranteed to do anything for you. Considering that, first of all, it only ever does anything if you crit, and even if you crit, the status effect still goes down. So it's just poorly designed, in my opinion. It's like paralysis in that way, you know, where it has a decently powerful effect, but you're not guaranteed to actually have it do anything, which makes it kind of bad, in my opinion. Luckily, she's a Blade Lineage identity, so, you know, she has more going on than just that status effect, but even still, I wish it would only go down in potency when it's actually struck by a critical hit instead of any hit. It's just that sort of thing, you know, where they should only reduce when they're actually having an effect, right? It would be like if poise count, right, goes down for every single hit you do instead of only critical hits, which I don't remember if that was the case, but I feel like I remember that poise did work like that before. I can't remember if that's the case, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like back in the day at game launch, that's how poise worked, where it just went down in not potency, in count every time you made an attack, regardless of whether or not it crit or not. And it made it pretty bad because, you know, the whole thing it didn't even work really. None of the identities had really good poise application in the first place. We head into 4 houses in Greed for the next floor, where we find the UBS system, wrist guards, and the old wooden doll, before making it to the boss against the Shi family. Alright, we have the Shi family we're up against. Pretty good. They're fairly easy, honestly. You know, something that's kind of interesting is, like, there are a few identities that, when making this team, sort of were very, very up for debate, I'd say, as to whether or not they would actually belong. And one of them in particular, he's not on the team right now, but one of the main ones that was kind of very debatable is Chef Gregor, because you could make the argument that Kurokumo Gregor is the worse bleed identity than Chef Gregor. And purely the reason why you could make that argument is because Chef Gregor has more bleed count than Kurokumo. Like, Kurokumo only has 1 bleed count in his entire kit on his skill 1 if you win a clash with him. But Chef Gregor, he has 2 bleed count on his skill 2. And that brings up a fairly interesting point, right? As to how much more valuable is bleed count versus bleed potency? Obviously, count is more important because it's a status effect that constantly loses count. Like, potency will never be reduced unless the count is fully dropped to 0, which inherently makes count, you know, more valuable. But when you're actually judging an identity as to, you know, whether one is better than the other, should you take how much count they have into account? Because in a pure vacuum, right? In a pure vacuum, Chef Gregor has 4 bleed total in his kit, whereas Kurokumo has, I think it's around like 9 or something like that. So if you judge them literally just based off of one another, then Chef Gregor is obviously worse. But again, he has that extra bleed count, which makes him honestly slightly more valuable than Kurokumo. But it really is quite difficult to say whether or not the fact that he has 1 extra bleed count makes him better in a team like this. It's very hard to say. Oh my god, that damage is ridiculous. She almost one-shot him. The mirror dungeon can get pretty stupid at times, man. It really can. I really do like Captain Ishmael. She's definitely one of my favorite identities, even if she's been power crept to some extent. We get into the Infinite Procession for the next floor, where we find the Tenacity Bolus, Fragment of Friction, Fragment of Desire, and Greycoat, before making it to the boss against the Bloodfiend trio. Okay, well, considering the fact that Merceau has literally never used a single skill that uses bleed damage in the entire run, I guess I'm kind of forced to use his bleed ego. Which, you know, this ego is actually a decent bleed ego, because it manually triggers a bleed stack. Obviously, it's nowhere near as powerful as, you know, Don Quixote's version of it, but it still has a niche of its own. Manually activating bleed. It can be good when you're attacking like a staggered enemy or something outside of the mirror dungeon, obviously. But even still, it's It's good. Good enough anyways. I don't really like it because I primarily like to do solo runs. And for solo runs, it's honestly pretty terrible. Just because Merceau doesn't... Up until he got his crush-bound past ego, it's like his best AoE ego was the corroded version of Capote, which is absolutely terrible. And it's like his Yearning Mercala, I did not like that thing because it just doesn't have any attack weight, you know? Still though, it's fine. It's a fine ego for what it is. It's just in that incredibly niche situation of soloing with Merceau, it's pretty bad. Anyway, the Bloodfiends are dead. I wasn't even thinking for half that fight. We get into Refraction Railway Line 4, Section 4 for the final floor, where we find peace of a relationship before making it to the boss against the King in Binds. Alright gamers, you already know what I have to do here. You already know what I have to do. I'm not allowed to use the identity because obviously she's not a bleed identity. But that doesn't mean I can't use the ego.
나와 그대의 힘을 합쳐 위대한 사랑의 힘을 보여줄 것을! 아르카나 슬레이어!
Almost 10,000 damage. If she was actually using the identity, it would be 10,000 damage because it gets an extra attack weight for using the identity, which is why Pequod Ishmael's here. Otherwise I would absolutely be doing this solo right now. It's just we don't have enough attack weight otherwise. It's a little unfortunate, but it is what it is. She almost hits 10,000 damage. Almost. Maybe she can hit it here because she has a lot of extra offense level from critting. Oh, there it is. 10,000. Let's go. Easy. Easy, bro.
굳이 자만하지 않겠어? 역사에 틀림없이 기록될 테니까.
And now we just straight up win. That was fun. I like the ending. Of course I did. I love my queen. Even when I'm not using her identity, she's still here in spirit. It would make more sense to use the Yearning Mercala ego, you know, considering this is a bleed team and everything, but like, come on guys. What else do you expect from me at this point? Of course I'm gonna use her ego.
이 작살엔 필살의 집념이 담겨있지. 보았나? 적은 이렇게 진작해졌다.
스프레드에 있던
우리의 확고한 승리가 눈앞에 있다.
오늘도 정말 멋진 활약이었어.
이번엔 성적이 좋았군. 하지만 머나먼 고래에 닿기 위해서는 아직도 부족하다. 다시 가스터빈을 점화한다. 그리고
And that's how I beat 10 floors of Mirror Dungeon Hard using the best bleed team in the game. Just like with any other status effect, the Mirror Dungeon can support all of them on its own, proving that all you really need is to merely have the status effect, as supporting it on your own is mostly irrelevant. Anyway, that's it for me. Like and subscribe for more videos like this one. Goodbye.